Hey, thank you so much for joining us on our inaugural DREI, the Real Estate Educators Association podcast. And we are talking all about the DREI on our podcast and various tips from instructors and people who can guide us in the right direction to be better instructors. And I'm so excited that Mark Barker, who is one of the he's the an OG, Mark. That's what I hear the younger people call it. He's an old gangster in the DREI world, but you are an original gangster. I said old gangster. I'm sorry. I heard that and I was like, oh, gee, what's that? And this girl, and then I finally found out they were like an original gangster of podcasting and so forth. But tell us about that, Mark. You've been around. First of all, thank you for joining.
You're very welcome.
And we'll have Mark's contact information below. He's with owns Career Education Systems in Kansas and Missouri, and a great guy. I've known Mark for many, many years. And but tell us a little bit about this whole DRE. Kind of give us a historical perspective, because I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, why did this start and how come it started, and kind of take us back to that.
Well, I actually prefer the term old gangster or old guy or something like that.
Okay, yeah.
They used to call me, long ago, they used to call me the grandfather of DREI. And then about 20 years ago, they started calling me the Godfather of DREI. And I thought, well, I'm not sure I like Godfather. But I was very fortunate back when I was not a charter member of REEA. I joined the second year after REEA had started. And it was really cool getting to be around. In those days, we had more college professors, we had more authors and books and all that. It was just really an outstanding opportunity to be with them. And REEA decided to start what they called the DREI, which at the time meant Designated Real Estate Instructor. What was happening, REEA was actually started by the people from Nebraska, Paul Quinlan from the Arello group. And what they wanted to do was have some kind of way to find out how good the people are. If they're really good, that way they could get approved in multiple states. It would be a whole lot easier to do. So we started the DREI. The problem was, at the time, we didn't really have the internet as we know it, per se. So what happened, they would have you do a 15-minute video of you teaching a class, and then you would send it in to REEA, and there were people who would review the video. The problem I ran into it, John, and I was one of those people who reviewed the videos, that we would have like 5 reviewers and 4 of us would totally disagree on everything. And what we found is, as time went on, there really were not a lot of criteria on what is an outstanding instructor. And the longer I thought about it, and I should throw in a quick disclaimer, I do have a master's in adult education. I will throw in the disclaimer that my professors, although they were wonderful, they didn't teach me how to teach. John, I learned all about Piaget, Erickson, Malcolm Knowles, but I didn't learn how to actually stand up in a classroom and teach. And so I started working and thinking, there's got to be a way we can have some real criteria for the DREI. And then I realized that most of the people who are teaching real estate did not come from an education background. And so what they were doing, they were teaching, they assumed they were better than they really were because they didn't really see other people teach. They depended on what their students told them. And as you know, the students, they tend to think we're wonderful even when we're not. And so what we ended up with was no criteria. People were passing who shouldn't have, and people who were failing who should have passed. So I decided I would write some criteria. I'd have to do some research and find it out. So I actually started, and this is almost 40 years ago, I started going back and I found the reviewers, the DREI reviewers had reviewed people. And I looked at all the things they had in common. So if there were 5 reviewers, and if all 5 said something was bad, that's a criteria we need to put together. So what I did, and thank God for Post-it notes, John. If it wasn't for Post-it notes, I'd never have anything. I took those yellow Post-it notes, and all I did was take all of the things that people did right or people did wrong, and all the reviewers had said and all that, and I blasted them on my classroom wall. And I spent a month just trying to figure out where they were. Then I started doing research on, talking to 3M about things and how they all did them. So I put it all together, and then I looked at that big wall, the yellow Post-it notes, and I started saying, okay, what do they all have in common? Where are they different and all that? So I put them all this, and I spent several days just moving everything around on the wall. And I ended up seeing that most of the reviewers were putting people either up or down based on one of 5 different categories. So I had them all spread in 5 different categories. For example, we started off, and that's what we call the DREI criteria. We started off in the idea of knowledge. If they said something that was wrong, and the reviewer said that was wrong, that should be a deduction or something like that. So I did that. Speaking of deduction, at the time I was doing this was during the Olympics. And I was watching the Olympics, and I was watching the figure skaters. And I was watching the judges who would give them a 9.8, 9.7. And they have mandatory deductions. If you fall out on the ice, if you're a figure skater, it's like a 1 point or 2 point deductions and all that. So I said, we could do that. We could turn around and say, this is good, this is bad, rather than saying that you are, you're wonderful. Let's give you 50 points in these 5 categories, put 10 points per category. We'll put them all there. And then we'll make a deduction when you did anything wrong, just like a figure skater falling off. And then at the end, if you had at least 40 of the 50 points left, you'd become a DREI. So I started off with knowledge, which is pretty straightforward. Most people do pretty well in knowledge. The other thing I noticed was people didn't know a lot about how adults learn, what's called andragogy, as opposed to pedagogy, how children learn. Treating adults like adults, teaching them that way, all the positive things. What is it that helps adults learn? Because adults only learn new information pretty much if they can tie it to what they already know, something in their past experience. So learning how to do that kind of thing. The third area I broke the yellow Post-it notes into was just speech. People either speaking too quickly, speaking too slowly, the class dragging. Or the thing we noticed mostly was they would just kind of lecture for an hour. They weren't bridging anything. They'd go, okay, next we're going to go to. Look at page 26, when the people weren't following them. Fourth area we came up was the idea of the learning environment, how you set up the room. People think that doesn't make that much difference. It does, John. How you set up the room dictates so much how you're doing it. And the last area was the area of teaching aids, how you use a projector, either LCD. At the time we were doing this, we were still using a lot of people using overhead projectors and things like that. So we had all these various things to do it right and do it wrong. So we came up with these 50 points, 50 things, and then we started saying, okay, we got to train all the people what they're going to do. So it's been a labor of love for almost 40 years, John, with finding out what works. Keep in mind, the teachers who believe what their students tell them, you know how the students say, you are the best teacher
Right.
ever, and all that.
Right.
Most of them haven't been in a class for 25 years. And so they're measuring it more based on how they like you than how good an instructor you are. Now, for those of us who teach a lot of pre-license, it helps a lot because the testing service tells them they didn't learn their material. Of course, believe it or not, John, there are people who actually blame their teacher if they don't pass the test.
That's right. That's a fascinating historical perspective. Thank you. And that's interesting how you got the point system and how you put those into the 5 different categories.
And we've updated it. We've updated it over these years.
Right. And so thank you for that. That very, very helpful. And I remember, when you were talking about a lot of the instructors didn't really, when continuing education was first required in Missouri, I think I'm going back to 1985 or 87. It was one of those years when continuing, and maybe it could have been sooner than that, because agency came along around that same time. But I remember several of the old guys or original gangsters from my board. They were the ones who taught my first continuing education courses. And Mark, I remember to this day, one gentleman told the awfulest, my mother, I'm there with my mom. I was embarrassed, but the awfulest jokes, and was never changed there. My mom and I left there and we were like, what? We have to do this every 2 years, And
the state makes us do it on top of that.
Yeah. And so, thank goodness we have the Real Estate Educators Association and the DREI to bring a level to speaking and professionalism for our industry and to help. And I'm just encouraging anyone who might be listening or watching that you will benefit through REEA, you will benefit through the DREI program. I just went through the DREI program a couple of years ago. Now I've been speaking for years, and I'll be transparent. Oh, I know all there is to know, but I wanted to go through that DREI program, and I'm telling you what, it really took my game to a different level. And today I just little things that I remember, and I need to go back through the book, but little things that I remember that has helped me to I think do a better job. In fact, I was in a presentation, listening to a presentation recently at a conference, and somebody asked a question. They never repeated the question. I barely heard what the person asked, but no one else heard, and the speaker just answered their question. And so that's one of the tips that we give as a DREI. You always acknowledge, thank, and repeat the question so everyone else in the room can participate in that.
John, the sad thing about that is it's not that the people are bad teachers. They just they don't know what they don't know.
Exactly.
They don't themselves in doing it. And unless somebody sits down and goes over it, and the DREI, as you know, not only do we basically the people go through the class. You have to have taught a number of years and built up so much things, but then you do that, and then we go. It's a 6-month program. We work with them basically 2 nights a month on Zoom. We do this on that one, and they put it all together, and then they have to pass that video with the 50 points with 5 reviewers from around the world to do this one. So many of them who are pretty good they're pretty good teachers, John. I don't mean to sound bad. They're not bad, but they're pretty good. And it's funny because I always thought, oh, this is so sad for me. You're pretty good, but you could be great. All you got to do is fix this, and you could be great. And I've had some of them say to me, they say, but you don't understand how good I am. I basically want to take them in my arms and hug them and say, yes, I do understand how good you are. You don't understand how good you are, but I'm going to tell you, I want you to be great, and I'll help you. That's what we do on the DREI program.
Yeah, and absolutely. And my first video that I turned in did not pass because Carol Murray, who was wonderful, and we had a great conversation. But Carol went through my video and pointed out. And when I watched the video back, I thought, oh gosh, she's right.
Exactly.
That's very distracting. Well, the next time I did my video, I passed, but I was so thankful that I didn't take the rejection or the video is not passing. Naturally I was discouraged, but I was able to learn from that, and it helped make me a better teacher. But I get not tickled, but I just see some of these speakers and I want to say, man, you need to go to the DREI and get in that, because it would just it would really polish you out to a great, as you said, they're good speakers. They're just some little things well, thank you for that. Now, one of the things that I would love we kind of want to pull some shorter videos out to highlight for our members. Give me something that you see teachers do a lot that they could change or correct, or as a coach or as a mentor. What's one item you see a lot of mistakes that we could fix by doing one item?
John, you nailed it when you were talking about the question, what the people did. It's not enough to know the answer. You've got to be able to communicate to that person and to the rest of the group. So what we teach when it comes to handling questions, if a person is asking a question, you immediately affirm the person for asking the question. Now, people say, well, what if it's a bad question? I say, no, we're not affirming the question. We're affirming the person. Oh, I'm glad you asked that. Oh, thanks. I'm glad you brought that up. What you're doing, you're letting them and the rest of the class know that it is not only acceptable, but it's encouraged to ask a question.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to repeat it to the rest of the class. And there's two reasons. One, as you mentioned, make sure they heard. But even more important than that is you can repurpose the question. You can put it together. You can paraphrase it enough so that everybody agrees on what the question is. And then you answer the class, the class as a whole. You answer the question to the whole class, not just the person who asked it. And I think that's even more important, John, for things like on Zoom teaching and that. You got to get the rest of the people in there because, as you know, many Zoom instructors are sitting talking to the one person, like 40 faces up on the screen.
Right.
And look, so we basically teach you affirm the learner, the person who asked the question, then you basically restate the question to the whole class, then you give the correct answer, and then you bridge on out to the next point. That's probably the number one area where people get deductions. The other thing, you heard me use the term bridging on out, is being able to tie things together back and forth through there. Because if you're a teacher, you're standing up there, you're thinking about something, and while you're still talking about one subject, you're already thinking about the next subject you're going to. So you're already going to that. The problem is your students can't do that because they don't know what that next subject is. So you have to do that for them. John, I learned how to bridge at an Arthur Murray dance class many, many years ago, which, by the way, is where I met my wife, Regina. But my teacher was there, and she says, you got to learn to lead. And I said, well, I'm not sure where I'm going, so how can I lead? And she said, well, here's the deal. The woman you're dancing with, you're the male lead normally. You have to be able to let them know where you're going. If you're going to go to the left, you have to give them some indication. You have to pull your hand there. You can't just jerk them around for this kind of stuff, or it won't work. And I remember that to my dying day. I remember that teacher, Jane, told me I need to do that. And I said, I bet I should be doing that when I'm teaching classes too. I bet I should be letting my class, I should give them a lead rather than just do it. So I just do it by bridging, like something they have in common, something that are different, like FHA or VA. We talked about FHAs for people with not much down payment, but what about people who don't have any down payment? Well, we have VA for that. So you're given the definition when you're also doing that bridge. And it's a real slick little way to teach, and the people really like it real well. So that's probably the biggest thing, bridging in that. And that's probably the two biggest areas that we make deductions on. Fairly almost everybody gets a deduction for those things. And it's not hard to do. They just forgotten how to do it.
Wonderful. I love that advice. Thank you. Anything else you want to just add about the DREI, about applying for that? When should a person apply, or what's your thoughts on those kind of topics?
I think any person who's been teaching for a couple of years, pretty much on a full-time basis, should at least attempt to become a part of the DREI program. You have to have been teaching that long just to get enough points built up where you can be part of the DREI.
Right.
The DREI is not an entry level instructors. It's for people who already are pretty good that want to go to that next level. So what I would do, you can go to the REEA website, and it's got the DREI form. You fill it all out, and send it in. We actually do 2 programs a year normally for about 6 months, and then another one for the second 6 months of the year. We normally we put about 12 to maybe a maximum of 15 people in a session, because when we're working with them, we want to be involved with them. I'm not lecturing to you for 6 months on how to teach. We're actually involved in a whole lot of things with you. So that's what I would do. I would get involved in that. And then once you finish the 6-month program, then you have a few months to do your video and get it done. And John, I'm going to tell you, most of the great DREIs in this country are just like you. They did not pass the first time. And, I've had some of them. We had a guy write an article in the REEA newsletter about 10 years ago that said, failing the DREI exam or failing the DREI video the first time was the best thing that ever happened to me. What they were saying was, I had no idea that I could be as good as I am because I didn't put the efforts in, because I thought I was already better than I really was.
Right.
What a great humble attitude, because unless you're fairly humble, you'll never become a great teacher.
That's right. I totally agree. And it's kind of like, I don't know if this will be a bridge or not, but it's kind of like real estate students who don't pass the exam the first time tend to be better real estate agents, because it wasn't a cakewalk for them. They have a little something, it means a little bit more to them. I've had agents who like, oh, back when they could show me what they made, and it's like, oh, I made a 98 and ace the state part of the exam, and Mark, they were the worst agents I ever had. And the poor little lady that came in and said, I made just barely squeaked by, but I passed. She would be a rock star as a real estate agent. So, you have to take those instances and learn from them. And, I mentioned Carol Murray, but
right.
I could go down the list of people that have been a part of the DREI program and how they share and how they give.
Exactly.
In January at the summit, the DREI summit that we have once a year. And I was talking to a gentleman. I was doing some podcast, and he was like, his last name was Hogan. And I said, the, Hogan School of Real Estate. He goes, yeah, that's me. So, yeah. And which is a good guitarist too. I think he wrote a song. Yeah. But, just sat there and gave me some great advice. But I think that's the thing. I went to my first REEA conference was in Paducah, Kentucky. And I remember meeting Charles Jacobus. I hope that's how we pronounce his last name. Jacobus, yeah. Chuck Jacobus. And I have his book over there, a couple of his books over there on my bookcase. And I thought, that's Chuck Jacobus. And, and he always did a law update. And then people like Lynn Elder, who's just been and we're going to get him on our podcast as well. But I could go on and on. But those are the people you'll be associated with. And really, it's kind of like I equate it to playing golf. If you want to go play golf with good golfers, come to REEA, be a part of the DREI, and you're going to be playing golf with some of the best golfers there, and they're going to help bring your golf game up. I'm using that as an analogy, but that's what it's like.
You mentioned that. I remember when I was a young REEA member, when I was young, period, I was walking down the hall, one of my first REEA meetings, and Bruce Harwood. Bruce was an author, and he'd written a lot of books on real estate stuff, and one of the giants of the day in that one. And I was walking down the aisle of the hotel, the hallway, and he looked at me, he goes, hi, because we had name badges. He goes, I'm Bruce Harwood. And I said, I'm Mark Barker. He says, have you got time to sit down and talk to me for a few minutes? He said, I'm working on some new material, and I'd like your opinion. And I'm sitting there thinking, me? You want to talk to me?
Right.
And he sat down, and we sat down and spent about an hour talking about things like that. And he's taking notes, and all of a sudden I realized he actually thinks I have something good to share.
Right.
I always remember just how wonderful I felt that other people cared, especially somebody like Dr. Harwood. And so if you want to hang out with the giants of the real estate teaching profession, that's where you go. REEA is the place.
You do. And I remember the publishers are there. I can go back and remember, I could name names, but and we'll kind of close with that, because I want people who are watching, you might be thinking about, the conference, I can't afford to go to the conference, or I don't have time to go to the conference or get involved with the DREI. But I was recently, for Missouri Realtors, went to a conference in France. It's called MIPIM. It's the largest trade show, largest trade conference in the world. And I was asked to go because our CEO could not go this year, and I'm the immediate past president. Last year I went as president, but for those who know me, going back a few years ago, I had my wife and I owned a pick your own blueberry blackberry farm, had some trials and tribulations, forged through all of that, ended up meeting a gentleman and living and working in France. And so I started going to MIPIM a number of years ago when I was living in France. And that was way before NAR got involved with MIPIM. So I love that conference, and I've been going. So I went back this year, and I'm walking through the hallway, Mark, and I see these people. They knew me. They were from another country. And they said, we've got to have, he asked what I was doing. And I told him I was doing some online coursework. And he said, we need to talk. And so we had coffee the next day. Well, lo and behold, they've hired me to do a project for them in their country. And I look back and I told my wife, I said, you know, sometimes we think we can't afford to go to a conference.
Yeah.
But you really have to flip it and say you can't afford not to go, because that's where you're going to meet someone, or you're going to hear a presentation, and they're going to give you that little bit of advice you need that can just change your whole speaking career, or change your whole knowledge of a subject matter that can just take you to that next level. So I just kind of wanted to give a plug for going to the conferences. And I know you got involved and you've been president of REEA, but it's had a huge impact on your life. So I don't know if you want to share anything there to kind of round up.
Let me share one thing that sometimes people get confused. REEA is what we call a professional group. It is not a place you come, although it doesn't mean, just like you talked about with what you did with France, it doesn't mean you can't get business from it, but that's not the purpose of coming.
Right. Yeah.
Part of REEA. Purpose of being part of REEA is the idea the best of the best share their best with each other, make it better. That's the way it all works through there. Now, we have regulators and we have realtor education directors there, and you might meet somebody and they might contact you in a couple of months, say, hey, have you thought about coming to New Jersey or something like that? But that's different. There are groups that if you want to go and speak or whatever, such as NSA or the rapid things, that may be able to help you get some speaking gigs. But what REEA does is helps you become a great instructor. And if you're into wanting to be a great instructor, that's what REEA is for. I just didn't want to oversell it and make you
no, and I'm glad thanks for sharing that. And for re-clarifying that, because I think you're spot on. And that's kind of what I should have brought that back. But it is really more about those connections and the professional and helping you raise your game. So thank you. Yeah. I don't want people to think, oh, I'm going to go there and get all these deals, but you never know. With I've been able to meet some people that I've collaborated with on doing a webinar, or it's just, for me, it's so helpful to know I can call you and ask you a question if I need some help or advice in a certain area. So yeah, thank you. Very good. Well, Mark, anything else you want to add to the DREI or REEA?
I will say what you said, paraphrase it slightly back. REEA changed my life from being a little teacher, Kansas City, who would teach a little bit and try to get better a little bit, to change it where I was a good, at least good, if not even better than that instructor. And it gave me the opportunity to share that with other people around the world. And I look back and I think, okay, maybe I would have been able to do things without REEA, but I don't know how I could have. And with REEA, I was able to do it and change my life so much, so wonderful as a result.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's very good. So, well, Mark, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your information about the DREI program and the history that you provided, and for all of the hard work that you have given to REEA. In fact, I think they even have an award that they give out with your name on it. So,
John, it's a labor of love. That's all. Labor of love.
It's I know it's it's a highly sought after award, and some really great people have received that. But Mark's a wonderful person. And again, I'll have his contact information down below. Thank you for watching this inaugural episode of our DREI podcast and for REEA. So I'm John Mayfield. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.